I am kind of relieved to be here. Yes. My family is in the United States, and we speak, every week, and there's updates, and, America's such a big country, and there's so much variety in it that that I think if I were to move back, I probably could find a place where I would be, I'd be okay. It's like a turning point, and interesting because, history repeats itself over and over again. And in the 60s, there was an increase in civil rights movements, also an increase in environmental awareness. And here we are, 2020, and on a global scale, the same thing happening again, which is, it's a time to actually do something, because if if we're still doing it, it means it didn't happen, or it didn't happen at the scale that was necessary. So yeah.
So what with regards to what your field is, like integration, cultural understanding, there's this whole discussion going on now about racism. It's nothing new, but do you think that this first feeling of that we are in something that important together, and in a good way, because it's not like a world war where a country fighting against others. I mean, there's a little bit like this battle between China and States with regard to coronavirus and all this, but in general, it looks like we are all together in this. And do you think that's going to strengthen the importance of intercultural competence?
Yeah, I do. I think also what's interesting about this time is that because it's on such a global level, it's affecting people of all age groups as well. So it's different generational cultures, it's different national cultures, it's different identity cultures, and it's all coming up at the same time. And I do think that the period of lockdown that we had, or the period of restrictions that we've had in terms of being able to live our regular life, created a space for us to really be able to reflect and think. Normally we're so busy running around doing this, doing that, doing the other, that having slowed down, it was a forced slowdown. It made you kind of take perspective and look at things, and made you realize what wasn't right, what needed to be changed. And in the conversations that I'm having in SIETAR, which is the Society for Intercultural Training and Research, the conversations are about change, about making change. And so how do you create change? You create change through a process of self-education, learning about yourself and how you make meaning of the world. And that period of slowing down gave us, I think it really did give us this opportunity to sort of go, well, what isn't working for me, and where are my values, and where do I actually want to put my energy? Because now I have a clear choice. And I do think that, technology, I've been struggling myself with the move to this sort of virtual space. It's not that I haven't been using it. I've been using it, of course. Mm-hmm. But the speed at which we all had to come on board together, and the amount of information, I think has pushed us towards wanting to do something. Because if you're stuck at home and you don't think that you're able to do anything because your normal doing thing is active, going out, then it's okay, so what do I do now? And I'm seeing this through SIETAR specifically. We're an organization of about 55, 56 members in Spain, and we're a part of SIETAR Europa, and there's different national SIETARs. And in light of everything that happened after this, you know, the different manifestaciones, the different protests that came about, there was a real sort of call to do something. And so what I've started is a series of conversations with the members of SIETAR to then reach out to organizations that are already working in the field of anti-racism and to see how we can support them, because it's not about us coming up with some new something. It's about us really looking at, well, you know, what are the areas that we want to support? And what I've sort of, in terms of an image, I think of it almost in terms of a table, no, a table for dialogue. And there are 4 different legs to the table. One has to do with social justice and with the judiciary system, so with changing laws and rights. One has to do with education and multicultural education, intercultural education, working with schools, starting with children and working anti-racism with them, both at the elementary and at the secondary level and also at the university level. And then the third leg has to do with diversity and inclusion in the workplace and people who are minorities, people of color, having greater representation, and not just in terms of being a token, actually really fostering dialogue around inclusivity. And then the fourth one really having to do with well-being and with the sort of psychological aspect of anti-racist work. And this has all sort of come together as a result of what's happening worldwide.
But Almendra, if you look at Spain right now, I mean, before coronavirus, I think Spain didn't have any racist or political extreme problem. It had no really important right extreme party. Now we have walks, and it's getting like very intense the way that they communicate things and try to exclude more and more certain segments from the society or attack them or whatever. So I see in Spain that it's going the other way around. I don't see that there is more integration right now.
I think in terms of media and the people, it's a question of who holds the power. And what you see and what you hear is usually a question of who's actually able to exercise the right of communication, who's more visible, and that Spain has a history of minimizing difference and a history of looking for commonality, which is good, but it's not enough. You have to work at actually sort of recognizing what the differences and what the contributions of that difference are to move forward. What I think is, you know, the media maybe isn't picking up on the different kind of grassroots initiatives that are taking place, the dialogues that are taking place, because perhaps we don't feel like we're represented in.
But we lived all these. I mean, I live in Pozuelo, and I lived these moments of just media thing. I lived it on the balconies, the people with the I don't think there's the cacerolas, you know, the pot. I don't know if to hit the pot. I don't know if that exists in other countries, but it was so, people got so instead of create a union in Spain, really they were creating, and it was something that the people also felt they needed to do that. And it really, compared to Germany, where I am from, it was completely different in Germany and in other countries as well, in France and Italy. How do you explain that? This, what happened here throughout the worst pandemic in the whole of Europe, and people have nothing else to do than to even stir up the ambience. I mean, to even make people feel more insecure.
Yeah. I mean, it's a question. It's a question of trying to take control of the power, I think. You know, when we look at, When we look at building intercultural competency, there's a couple of different ways, of going about it. I think the way that I've been trained is that there's a developmental model that we can look at, which is Milton Bennett's developmental model of intercultural sensitivity, and it's a stage model. In other words, you have to go through different stages in order to become more ethno-relative. You're going to be ethnocentric, and you have to move towards seeing similarity, and then you have to move towards seeing difference again to be able to see the value of that difference, to then be able to concentrate again on what unites us. And the whole cacerolada, what Vox is doing is the step before minimization. It's the polarization step, where it's an us versus them. And these things coexist simultaneously. But bringing out that difference, I always feel like it's a part of the process. You can't just say, oh, we all get along, when we don't. And so bringing it forward highlights the importance of the need for the change. I think people were just remarkably, the lockdown has been a remarkably frustrating, scary situation. And if you're able to mobilize people towards separation, you will do it. And if you're able to mobilize people towards unity, you might be able to do it as well. But I think that really has to come from within. Whereas what Vox was doing was from without. No, it's making people pick fights with each other. But I think there was an anchor. Yeah.
As an organization, you have any contacts with Vox? I mean, do you? Because that is really where anti-racism and exclusion, because they're not so racist, but they try to exclude people from certain things in a very like all the extreme bodies, in a very intelligent way, so that people not really realize what's going on. You have any contact with them?
So SIETAR is a little bit of it's an organization that's structured a little bit differently, I think. It's a professional organization, so it's a society of members that work within the intercultural field, but each of them are individuals, and we come together over the interest in intercultural. But intercultural is massive. Intercultural can be, people changing countries because of work, people changing countries because of wars, people changing countries because of economic reasons. It can be working on a very local level with schools. I mean, it has intercultural work, diversity and inclusion in businesses. It's super ample. And so as an organization, what we're working on is establishing the interconnectivity of the different members. And now what we're working on is also now reaching out to other organizations that are working in areas that we're interested in. So there are people specifically that are working in the sort of the political sphere. But as an organization, we don't work in the political sphere.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. And if we stay there in the political field that now got so much into the families as well, again in Spain. I mean, you born in Spain, you always live between the States and Spain, and of course United States has so many problems right now as well. So, but comparing Spain to other countries in Europe, it seems like there's still so much need to integrate culturally just the Spaniards, not even foreigners that come here, because I think that's not the big deal here, but to the two sides, or three sides, probably they're already like separatist, the rojos, the red ones, and the blue ones. So you have probably three parties already that you have to integrate somehow.
And if we look at the elections, I mean, the elections show us just how many different sides there are in Spain, right? I mean, it's not it doesn't go back and forth from sort of left to right, from left to right. No, it's a huge amount of small parties and big parties, and the inability to create government because there's no one group that represents us all, right? So work needs to be done with figuring out how the different sides, I agree with you, how the different sides can actually work together to go forward. I mean, this sanitary crisis that we had shows us that, you know, public health is vital to a society like ours. The privatization, it's not going to work when you have something this big. So you really do need to support public health, public education. All the public needs to be supported. But then at the same time, there's the group of people that are, I guess, afraid. And I think this is the thing that sort of gets me always. This divisiveness is based on a fear. It's a fear of losing something that you think you have. My question that I always ask myself is, well, what actually do you have to lose? You know, this is it, but it's a mentality, it's a concept somehow that I need to protect what I think I have that is mine. The question is it really yours? So,
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, this fear thing, I guess, also in your daily work, everything is based, all our stereotypes are based on fear, and all the policy right now that we see in Brazil, in the States as well, here, or in many places, they always like to work with making people afraid. Is there any change that we could overcome this old scheme? I mean, it's such an old thing, and become really a little bit more, wiser. I mean, a little bit more intelligent.
yeah. One of the things, I mean, I had my hesitation about the virtual. I really did, because because I'm a teacher, I'm a trainer, I'm an educator, and the move to online was daunting, and it had to happen very quickly, and people had to have access to it. And there's never going to be this. It's not the same. They're different things. You can't substitute face to face with virtual. However, it has a different function and it works. And one of the things that I have seen from what we've been able to accomplish during this time is that you really can have conversations with a very wide group of people. And so one of the things that I think we can do is work on increasing our dialogue, increasing our conversation through this means. It's harder to and it's dangerous to meet physically. But this sort of way of communicating now really allows you to have those meaningful conversations with a wider variety of people, provided those people are willing to step into that space. And working at making people feel comfortable, it takes time. In other words, you don't establish change and you don't establish relationships with people that you don't know unless you give them time. And it's not fast. And it requires repetition. It's a practice. So if I'm going to be having these conversations, I need to hold them every 2 weeks, or I need to, and I need to invite people and make it wider and wider and wider. But there needs to be that level of repetition, because as people, we want to trust each other. How do you remove fear? By establishing trust. And trust is developed over time. You don't just give somebody trust because you have to work through that. And so what I'm finding in any case is that through SIETAR, I'm having every 2 weeks conversations, every 2 weeks, and people who want to show up. And then we open things up to a wider community, and we provide training. People who want to show up, and it's interesting because it's always different now, but it is reaching people. It is, but it takes time. It takes time.
Okay, thank you very much, Almendra. And I think that's probably what we can learn from the conversation is that we need to think about things, just reacting, not just reacting, like thinking and reacting.
Yeah.
And
It's, for me, you know, how you change follows a series of, you know, there's a stimulus, right? There's a need. If you have no need to change because you're comfortable and everything's fine, then you don't. But there's a calling for change, and I think people who perhaps beforehand hadn't felt it now do, because of that space for reflection. We don't, when you're caught up in survival, in living day to day, which I think, you know, even though we live in, you know, industrialized societies and we have houses and cars and televisions and all of this, there is still that kind of, you know, survival mentality. And I think you and I have had this conversation about New York. I mean, you know, speaking of the chakras, the survival chakra in, you know, in these types of societies that are so high pressure, it overtakes you, and you don't sort of step back and think, what am I doing? And we've been forced to do that. We've been forced to step back, and I think lots of people are hearing that sort of inner call for change. But it requires self-education and then practice in something. It's not enough to just read. You actually have to start doing something. And that can also be, you know, kind of daunting, because where do you begin? So just pick one thing. Pick one thing that you're motivated to change and do that, and then it will grow. Yeah.
Last question. I would like to know that, because you ever thought about in this time to go back to the States? Or are you happy that you are here? I mean, what is your feeling about that?
Well, I'm at a point. Yeah, no, I mean, I moved to Madrid in 1999, so I've been here for 20 years now, which is the longest, obviously, I've ever been in any one place. And I am kind of relieved to be here. Yes. My family is in the United States, and we speak, you know, every week, and there's updates, and, you know, America's such a big country, and there's so much variety in it that that I think if I were to move back, I probably could find a place where I would be, you know, I'd be okay. But for now, no. I'm happy to raise my children and to be working and living here, I have to say. Yeah.
Right. That's good. We have to promote Spain. I mean,
Yeah.
People come here and have their vacation and live here. I mean, that's important for Spain. So we have to do that somehow.
Yeah, no, and it's
okay.
You know,
thank you.
Generous. It's a generous place to be. So, you know, I think it needs to stay that way. Hopefully, it's one of the values that I hope remains through all of these changes. Thank you, Stephanie. Thank you for the conversation.
Have a nice day. Bye bye, and have a nice week. Okay. Bye bye.
Bye bye.